Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and we have the legend that is. Are you still co-working with Iris, or are you just Iris now? What happened?
Oh, I think I'm really just Iris these days.
Oh, it's like a rapper changing his name. So, Iris, for the 4 people listening to this podcast that don't know who you are, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
Oh, wow, Bernie. So I guess I'm known for my early days at NextSpace, and probably mostly for my hiring and community building. And I guess what I'd really like to be known for is inspiring people to be the transformational leaders that you are when you're running your co-working space, and know that you are impacting, potentially thousands of lives in your community, and to hold yourself in that esteem. And I don't mean like huge ego way, but, in a way that really honors the role that you have in your community, and to support yourself as a leader in that way.
Convening space as small business advisors. And is that the type of role you're talking about?
Yes. I mean, I'm really referring to, this idea that as a small business owner, you might be operating your business with just yourself or maybe a couple of employees. And so that feels, your business size itself feels perhaps like you are a micro business. But the truth is that the impact of your business is on a more macro level in your region or in your community, because of the number of lives, the number of jobs that you're creating by opening your co-working space, the number of lives that you're touching by connecting and being that connector within your community. And when we really understand the true power of the role of the co-working leader within a community, they are a hub themselves within the community that is really a meeting place for so many different walks within that community to connect through.
So this might sound like a really weird question, but like, why are we doing this co-working thing? Because it's not, there's easier ways to like either gather people or make money. And there's something, I know this, to some people, this might sound a little bit romantic, but like it's more than I want to rent some desks. And I think we've just conversations that are around things like we were at the Co-working Alliance Summit last night. Something's happened, and maybe it's just my romantic view of where we are, but something's happened and everyone's getting a bit more connected and serious. So like, why are we doing this co-working thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're doing this co-working because we're not meant to do things alone. We're meant to do them together, and we're hardwired for that togetherness. Our biology requires it. Our health requires it. And I really feel that people who are opening co-working spaces are answering a need that is hardwired, and we are coming. I have a 50s theory on how 50s American culture almost destroyed society, and maybe we're still on that way, but hopefully people like co-working leaders are really kind of turning that around. But this isolation and individualism that was sort of the dream of a time, it really created so much fracturing in our societies. And you add to that the generational trauma that we're seeing played out in the world over and over right now. And I think we are at a time where humans know that we've got to come together, and we've got to bridge the divides that are keeping us separate. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by getting out of the cubicles, right, and into common spaces, and also now by coming out of our home offices and the ways that these are isolating us, and coming together as a need to be around others, because that's what allows us to regulate our nervous system better in a lot of cases.
So are you saying that if we, which I agree with, that sounded like a challenge. You're saying, Iris. So okay, so I went to...
Challenge me, Bernie, challenge me.
We've been... This happened to me. There's a little co-working space that I'm in called Fento Coworking, and I put a link in the show notes. And I have been working for 3 days in a row at home because I was just doing a lot of calls and, couldn't be bothered to get out of the house. And then I got to Fento and I felt rejuvenated, partly because of the way it's decorated. It's all like very specific and woody and biophilic, and then there's plants and dogs. But I felt a rejuvenation there. And is that probably answered my question by my example, but is that what you're talking about?
That is what I'm talking about. And I love that you talked about the way that the space was designed. That plays a really key role in how we interact in our spaces with each other. If we have environments that are all about sort of, hustle harder and, not ever stopping, we are going to interact with each other and with ourselves in those environments in a different way than we are in a space that is made to more mimic the natural environment, which studies have shown that our nervous system is more easily able to regulate in the natural environment. And, honestly, our success in life is really determined by our ability to regulate that nervous system.
You said hustle there. I always find that there's nice people running these, by the way, but like when I go to co-working spaces and there's like hustle and grind hashtag or something on the wall, it sends a shiver up my spine, because that is like I know this, even people like Gary Vaynerchuk and big men in this voice say, like, you can't be hustling all the time, people. It's really bad for your health. I don't know how people haven't got the message. So what is, can you say, I want to go back to that bit about because there's something that I've seen happen so many times, but it doesn't seem to be the main kind of conversation around co-working. And, a co-working space is like a hub of all that community activity, but it's such a important part of the local economic, regeneration development ecosystem. In the UK, in Islington, they did a lot of research, and when someone spends £1, and in the States this would be $1, it goes around. If you go and spend it in a supermarket, it disappears. But if you go and spend it with a local business, it goes around the local economy 4 times, and that type of thing. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah. So through my time with coworking, I have seen that coworking is an economic development engine that has, I really think, a massive amount of potential for the impact that it can have at a local and grassroots level. And I think that coworking creates stable economic development in a way that where growth that happens slowly is stable, right? And so I think that coworking allows for growth to happen at a you and me and everybody around us rate that then goes up. So it's like the trickle up economy, if you will, because when you take a co-working space, and this has been my personal experience, is that when you take a co-working space in the middle of a struggling economy, the people who enter that space are driven to transform that economy and to transform themselves in that economy. And they're collectively working, because it's co-working, together to do so. And then as that prosperity begins to develop amongst the members of the co-working space, they are then going out, as we know, into the local community and spending that money locally, because, depending on where the space is located, but most likely the space is in walkable distance to something else. And so they're walking and they're spending that money outside of the space. And so, eventually that money is trickling up, and it also begins to then trickle up as people climb economic ladders as well. And I've seen that over the course of 16 years of co-working. I've seen many people climb an economic ladder because of the connections and the network that they have found themselves in and created and helped to co-create and develop through co-working.
What helps those connections happen? Because I hear, like if someone came to me and said, "Oh, how do I do that?" I'd look at the person I'm working with and see what we're doing. But if I haven't, how do I get that little flywheel or ecosystem going? Because I feel it's very personal. It's not like a cookie cutter thing. What do you think?
Do you, just to clarify, are you asking how would a co-working operator get that going in their space, or are you asking how would I as a co-working member start collaborating with other members?
It was the first one, and it was a really bad question. Sorry.
Okay.
I was too excited.
Yeah. I mean, this is like the age-old co-working chicken and egg question, right? Do you start with a community, or do you build a community while you're going? And I think it's all of the above. If in order to build that in a co-working space, you need to establish psychological safety. And that psychological safety is that sense that we have that it's okay to be me, and it's okay for me to be vulnerable. I can ask a question about something I don't know about or don't understand, and I will not be shamed or judged in doing so. And actually, I know that this is a place I'm going to receive beneficial responses when I ask that question. And so that psychological safety that's established between people establishes that sense of connection. And that's what we think of when we feel that connection in a co-working space, when we feel like we're part of something and we belong there. It is that psychological safety that we're establishing. So that's number one. And there's a lot of different things that you can do to establish that. The first one being, be curious and open with the people in your space, and be vulnerable about yourself, and make connections based on a real relationship that you're building with each individual person. And when you model those individual relationships being built, those will be modeled. And we can talk more about that, but those are the first things I'll say.
That's the thing that some, in this podcast, some form of like safe space is what in lots of different situations come in. And like, can you give me your opinion on that safe space thing? Because, like it's so connected to creativity and wanting to go in there and, looking forward to going to the co-working space.
Yeah. Oh, I love this conversation, or I love this question. So Dr. Daniel Friedland, who wrote the book on evidence-based medicine that the world now uses, his next book that he wrote was called Leading Well from Within. And he did the work for us of mapping our brain centers to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so what he established is that when we are in our amygdala, at the base of our triangle, our biggest need and all that we can focus on is getting those basic needs met. And we must move from our amygdala, from our fight-flight response to stress or triggers that cause us to feel unsafe. We must move out of that. We move first through our limbic system, which is our emotional response system. And you might say that that's where we feel love and belonging. When we experience ourselves in a co-working space, and we're experiencing that feeling of belonging and that feeling of connection with somebody else and appreciation of that person, and we're feeling appreciated as well, that's that sense of love and belonging, and we're existing in our limbic system, which is not a bad place to exist, although it can cause us to make decisions out of emotions rather than more logic or solutions-based decisions. when we travel out of the limbic system and up through the pyramid, we are traveling into our prefrontal cortex.
That was like my very own one-to-one with Brené Brown. But that's like, I hear people talking about that, but I don't hear people talking about that enough. And there's a feeling when I go into different work environments, if you like, I'll sit down and I have that warm, glowy feeling you described. I'm like, oh, I can work, and it takes me a long time to, settle down. But I think and it's also to do with the people around me as well. If I'm, there's co-working spaces I go to, and I sort of, the getting settled accelerates because of the people and the environment and that feeling you just described there. There's something else I want to jump on, Iris, which I heard you say last night at the time of recording this. It was the day after the Co-working Alliance Summit with Sam Ashley and Hector. And there's that word hospitality, which I love. And you said something that I really agree with, but it's like a warning card about how we get excited about hospitality and co-working.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love hospitality as well. I mean, it feels good to have someone, take good care of you, right? And I've also noticed over the last many years in co-working conversations, a real focus, a lot of people talking about we are hospitality first, or we're a hospitality driven company. And I think that's really great. I think that making sure that our members and their guests feel well taken care of and have all their needs met is one of the ways that we can make sure that they're able to stay in those creative centers. And I also truly believe in authentic community, and that requires ownership for members. And I see a slippery slope when a member believes that everything is going to be done for them. And so they develop a sense of entitlement. And I'm not saying that all members do that, but there are those that do. And we set the conditions for that to happen when we are 100% everything's done for our members here type of focus. And so I think we can look at ways within our hospitality that allow for organic ways for members to build ownership, say, make a pot of coffee for their fellow members. I think that can be a really good way of building ownership within the community.
It's a great way of like creating, a reason for people to say something to each other. So like Adam at Indie Hall is one of my favorite stories ever. Is on his computer screen, he has a little label that reminds him to ask the community. So when someone comes to him and says, oh, where's the photocopier? He'll say, oh, Iris knows about that. So people are always like being, not because it's certainly not because he can't be bothered to help people, but if he's doing like all these micro things every day, like taking a plate from someone's desk and back to the dishwasher, you feel like you're doing something. It's like if you do everything for your child, when they leave home, they won't be able to do anything.
Right.
And it's that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I often felt, before I launched my first child into the world, that I was setting them up for the last couple of years to be a good housemate, And so I think we can set our members up for being good co-working members by respecting their ability as working adults to carry their own dishes, load the dishwasher, clean the conference rooms after themselves, and have a little sign that reminds them that that's the norm. That's our community norm, is that we clean the conference rooms after ourselves. We pick up what we brought in. We don't just leave trash everywhere with the assumption that there's service that will come and clean up after ourselves. Just
being a nice human being. Before we disappear, I want to go back to something we were talking about before we came on, which is really, I just think it's really important in a humanity growth kind of way. Is you said when you're, I've wrote it down really badly here. Sorry, folks. But so when you're running a co-working space, either as an owner or a manager, and you're this like being pulled in 17 directions, there's something about taking the time to understand yourself, and so you can lead the community. And can you say a bit about that understanding yourself thing? Because that's something I wish someone had said to me 20 years ago.
Yeah, me too.
I'm
Yeah.
asking for a friend.
So I mentioned earlier that I really see community building, and building a really robust and engaged community as a series of building individual relationships. And our first and most primary relationship is the one that we have with ourselves. And what I have found as I have come to know myself is that because I know myself better, I'm a better leader. And when the places that I've been ignoring or the places of myself that I don't want to accept, that are uncomfortable, the places where I make mistakes or I harm others or, I look ridiculous, all of those places, my shadow, are places that I haven't wanted to accept in life. And as I have come to accept those fully and integrate them, and know myself, know my weak places, that's where my strength as a leader has come from. And I believe that holds true for all of us. So we need to know ourselves in order to best know where we need work, where we need to work on building our tools and building our strengths as managers and as leaders, and also where we shine so that we can really pour that out into the world as we're also building to strengthen those other areas.
That's beautiful. It's really important work, that, because we can get lost in the shiny fast company biz magazine stuff, but retaining that, which I absolutely do, folks. But retaining that human connection with ourselves and the people around us is I'd say what would you say that is, Iris? Like, it's never ending work? How would you describe it?
It's never ending work. And, I think some of the best advice I've ever heard, and I don't remember when I first heard this, I think I was a child even, is when we are in relationship with someone and we see something that we don't like or that makes us mad or makes us uncomfortable, it's almost always a mirror of something that we are not accepting within ourselves. And so that's why this work is so important and is ongoing, because let's face it, we're all human. So we're all here to be growing and learning in some way.
I've heard that too, and it terrifies me, especially when I get annoyed with my son. I'm like, oh dear, am I doing that? I just got to force this in here at the end. There's an author called David Brooks, and he's got a book which came out at the end of last year called To Know Someone. I'll put a link in the show notes, but there's a line in there that says about looking at particularly our close relationships in friends, family, and work, and looking at other people as not as problems to be solved, but as mysteries to be unraveled. Mm-hmm. And that has just made my year. Iris, where can we find you, track you down, do stuff with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Iris Kavanaugh, and Kavanaugh is spelled without a U. And you can also track me down on Instagram at Iris Kavanaugh or at Women Who Co-Work. Both of those will find me.
Gee, what's Women at Co-Work? I can't believe we got this far in the conversation without mentioning what that life's work.
Oh, yeah. Women Who Co-Work is, it has been many things, and all of them have been focused on supporting diversity in co-working through making sure that women have a place in leadership in this movement. So womenwhocowork.com is where you can find us. And yeah, I think that's the answer to your question.
It's a really important place on the internet. I interestingly launched Men Who Co-Work at the same time, but it just never got the same traction. So
we were really rooting
very much
for you.
Your time today. It's always amazing speaking to you. I remember the last time I actually podcasted with you was in 2019 in Bathtub de Ballroom in London. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you Google or Safari, whatever you do, Co-working Values podcast, and you'll find about 160 episodes now of people who are doing interesting things around the world. And we always look for the people who are, not showing up at the top of search, but are in their neighborhoods and their communities and building something. And we now do this podcast twice a week, and we have lots of different tracks going on, and we'd love to hear from you. And if you get a chance, please spread the word and send us anyone interesting you'd like to hear us share their story. Thanks very much, and be careful out there. It is a jungle.